Welcome to the Fit Dads podcast. I'm Brett Thompson. As always, I'm joined by the legend himself, Mr. Ryan Dutton, and we're back on the road today, Ryan, but for good measure. We are in the offices of the South Yorkshire Eating Disorder Association, otherwise known as SYEDA, and we're joined by Kirsty Armstrong and Sophie O'Horan, two people who spend their days inside the stories that most of us never hear. And today we'll be talking to the girls about pulling back the curtain on what really happens in the world of eating disorders, the warning signs that we miss, the pressures young people are drowning in, and the subtle shift where empowerment can turn into obsession. Now, if you are a parent, a coach, or anyone who cares about what health actually means, this conversation isn't optional. So thank you for joining us, girls.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
It's great to have you on. There's so many overlaps between what you guys do and what we do. We see it in our industry. It's a big part of the fitness world. I guess let's start with your stories. Like, what led you to being at SYEDA?
Do you want to go first? You've been here the longest.
Yeah.
I have, yeah. So for me, kind of working within this sector is really important because I have my own lived experience of an eating disorder. I wanted to be able to support other people that were going through really similar things to what I'd been through. I think for a really long time, I didn't fully believe that I had an eating disorder, how much of an impact on my life it had. And so being able to kind of give back and support other people was something that I felt really, really passionate about helping. And then my background is in training and education. So coming into this role was really important, wanting to kind of reduce the stigma, making people aware of what disordered eating is, how it transpires, and how we can recognize the kind of early warning signs as well and get people the support that they need. But primarily to drop the stigma that is attached to eating disorders and the shame that's around it, to open kind of those everyday conversations that are really, really difficult for people and almost normalize it in a way that it's okay to talk about these things and point people in the right direction for kind of signposting and support.
Why do people struggle with opening out about eating disorders? What is the shame around?
I think the shame can kind of come in. Well, the one thing that I will say about eating disorders is they're so hidden. There's so much secrecy around them. And I think a lot of the time, and we're looking at two different things. We're looking at a kind of eating disorder diagnosis. So when we talk about an eating disorder, for a lot of people, you go straight to the extreme version of how a person with an eating disorder might look or might appear. And things like anorexia, bulimia, things that are in the press quite a lot. And then we look at disordered eating behaviours, which kind of go under the marker a bit. So these might be behaviours that people are engaging in, and it might be they're starting off on kind of a journey to get healthier, and then that's kind of almost
Taken to the extreme.
Yeah, taken to the extreme. And so I think for me, looking at my own experience, it's probably better to kind of relate it to that. A lot of my friends, a lot of my family would just be like, oh, Kirsty's really healthy. Like, she's training all the time. She's long distance running. She's racing most weekends. And people would come to me for kind of help and advice. So I was almost put on like a bit of a pedestal. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was very hidden that these behaviors when I was at home of really restricting what I was eating, counting my calories all the time, not eating properly to maintain the kind of level of exercise I was doing. There was a lot of shame around that because people were coming to me and wanting kind of health and
Do you feel like
advice.
you were the like pinnacle in your family in terms of health, wellness, and you felt like you had to live up to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So when anyone would mention, oh, do you think this is a bit extreme? Or I'd be like, no, there's nothing wrong. Like, I'm living this really kind of healthy, holistic lifestyle. But underneath, what people didn't see was that it was a really kind of destructive pattern of disordered eating and behaviours that were making me really ill. But you didn't show that. And I think that's the shame, that's the stigma, is that I've put myself in this position where I'm giving other people advice on fitness, and it'd be really, really shameful to then admit that actually I struggle with these things. And I think the power has really shifted now to be able to say, I know how difficult it is. Yeah. I know that it is really, really hard to talk about this, but actually by opening that narrative more, it's helping other people to come forward.
Interesting. Sophie, what's your experiences with eating disorders?
With eating disorders, so yeah, mine started with lived experience. Mine started at school, and I was the kind of kid that like you'd never think would have an eating disorder. I had the biggest appetite growing up. Like I never had kids' portions. I always had adult portions.
I can relate.
And yeah, and I was just like literally kind of quite obsessed with food. But then when I was, I think about like 13, I got diagnosed with something called scoliosis, which is relatively common. But the onset of it was very quick and very rapid. And I then had to wear a back brace, and then I had to have surgery when I was about 15. And all of that kind of all of a sudden not knowing what your body's doing, going through puberty, all of that change was so hard to deal with that I took control of one of the only things I felt I could, which was food. And then I developed an eating disorder. I got diagnosed with anorexia when I was 17, and 16, 17. And then I always think I was lucky to go straight to inpatient because I was the kind of person who displayed all of the classic warning signs. So I was a teenager, I was a girl, I was white, I was really thin, I was all of the things. My period had stopped, like every kind of tick, tick, tick box. And then I was an inpatient for around a year, and then I just moved straight to London. A bit random.
Okay.
But that kind of almost like really helped me, and I kind of almost like closed the door on an eating disorder and started my new life. However, in the back of my head, I knew I always wanted to help people, but I didn't know in what way I could. So I'd always had in the back of my head, like, because you make friends and you see people who are maybe struggling, and every now and again I'd kind of share my experience. I'd say, I think I empathize with what you're going through. And then after living in London, I moved back here, and I was looking for volunteer work because I needed something to give me a bit more meaning in my life. Like my day-to-day job wasn't really giving that. And I came across SYEDA, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this would be a goer. So I started volunteering with SYEDA, and I essentially kind of felt like my lived experience was able to give me a lens through which I could help with the visual messaging of SYEDA. So I worked with them to change the color palettes and the branding a bit, and I really helped, in my opinion, warm it up a little bit, like, or at least reflects the warmth that SYEDA provides visually. And then I essentially, after a few months, they offered me a job, and I now work as the campaign and engagement coordinator, and I help raise awareness for eating disorders, which for me is like a bit of a dream come true, as like cliche as it sounds. And I work with Kirsty, and we help raise awareness in the community, bring the community together, and I think, as Kirsty mentioned, like just really destigmatize, because it is like the greatest barrier to referrals is shame. So yeah.
You talked about something there, marketing, and your role in SYEDA with that. We spoke a little bit before the pod about marketing to people who have eating disorders and how effective that is now, how they're trying to get into the mind of those people, and the pushiness of it all as well. And do you feel like you guys have got to try and match that to get your name out there in terms of letting them know that there's other avenues? You mentioned about it feeling a bit wrong with the marketing as well, like not going too far with that.
Yeah, I think that it's a tricky one, because a lot of the people that use our service, like, essentially victims of marketing. And it's definitely, I think we've had conversations internally about social media. Should we be on social media? Should we be kind of essentially attracting people to a platform that could be quite damaging to their mental health if too much time is spent on there? And I think that it really is a balance. I think that when it comes to marketing, I like to kind of reframe it within this context as awareness raising, because part of marketing essentially is awareness raising, but we're not trying to sell people anything other than the idea that recovery is possible. So I think that's how I like to work with it. And then with social media, if anyone visits our social media, it's very much a springboard for people to then go to our website, because that's where people can get help. So yeah.
What is your general advice around social media for most people who suffer with an eating disorder? Is it generally like stay off it, or is there more of a nuanced approach with each person?
I think it's nuanced. I think it's really individual. It's a difficult topic to touch when it comes to social media because we know the dangers. We know that people are spending a lot of time on there, especially when it comes to kind of fitness and things like the hashtags like clean eating. It can be really, really addictive, for want of a better word. It's hard. I often, when I'm speaking to people, I talk about kind of setting boundaries around social media use. And if it's something that is making you feel a certain way and that's not helpful to you or where you're at the moment, because I think even recovery pages as well can almost be a little bit dangerous, can't they? Because I think when you're in those really, really early stages of recovery, you're in a really vulnerable position. So you're kind of holding on to anything anyone says to you because you want to feel better and you almost want to kind of rush that process. So if you're on kind of recovery pages and they're telling you to do one thing and that's going to really be helpful for recovery, you're going to do that and you're going to stick to it. So I think it's about having that kind of self-awareness really and knowing when it's a bit too much.
It's difficult because social media is so much a part of everyone's life, isn't it, today? It's from family to socializing, finding out new interesting bits of information, being inspired. But you're not human unless you've been on social media and felt a little bit shit about seeing someone else's progress or what they do. And, you know, even if you're the least jealous person ever, sometimes you get that little bit like, I feel worse. And you come off social media sometimes and you genuinely feel like that wasn't a good experience. And I think for some people that just becomes the norm, it takes over. And maybe that's where a lot of people's eating disorders stem from. But sorry, go on, Brad.
No, I'm going to say it's mainly, like Ryan said, down to the comparison side of things, the understanding where people are at right now. And yeah, just to say so far, thank you for being so candid and open, honest about about
difficult to share stories, but I guess you guys have probably done that for so long now with people that because it's relatable, isn't it? You have to be in this kind of industry.
I think when Sophie and I first kind of got together in this team, just before the summer really, we sat down, we had a really long, hard conversation and we said, what is this training team going to look like for us? What approach do we want to take? We're going to be going out into the community. We're going to be working with healthcare professionals, educational professionals, both very passionate about fitness. We want to kind of reach that audience as well. What is the messaging that we want to give? And what's worked for us in our own recoveries as well. And for me, it was hearing other people's stories, feeling like you're not alone, and having that kind of rawness about it definitely helped my confidence to be able to come forward. And we said we wanted to bring that into our training, didn't we? We wanted to bring lived experience. We wanted all of our training and education that we kind of provide around eating disorder awareness to be grounded in real life lived experiences. And I think it's something that we just are really, really passionate about, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I just think that, you know, when I remember being, around 16, 17 and being so scared that I had this thing, which I knew even before anyone else pointed it out that I was struggling with, but I felt so alone. And it was, I think if I'd have had someone who go, it's going to be okay, it's going to be hard, but it'll be okay, I think I might have felt, just that bit more reassured.
Yeah, I suppose in terms of what you girls do, it sounds very belief shifting. And I think that relatability from a standpoint of if someone sits with one of the team members here, I'm right in thinking it's down the CBT method. Is that correct?
And counselling.
Yeah. So I think from a counselling and CBT perspective, what would you say is the worst or the most common bits of terrible advice that people come to SYEDA with, whether it's relating to social media, and Kirsty mentioned that clean eating? Is there any beliefs that a lot of people come to SYEDA with that are really damaging?
Maybe like fasting. Maybe.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think that there's a lot around there about, there's a lot of hypervigilance over kind of using wearable tech and using blood glucose monitors and things like that. And absolutely in the right situation, like those things can be, life-changing for people who really need, the blood glucose monitors and things. But I think maybe after talking to the clinical team, one thing that does come up a lot is the kind of beliefs around what are the kind of popular trends at the moment, such as fasting, and I think kind of again that does tie in with things like blood glucose monitors and stuff. And I think that people are so scared of doing the wrong thing, and they might be really doing absolutely fine. But I think that, I think there's that fear around doing something that's wrong that's going to hurt your body, where actually, like, it's maybe quite ironic because you're doing that through the kind of over obsession and stuff. So
I think it's a real difficult one as well, because eating disorders are so unique and they present so differently. I think I said earlier, they don't present always as this stereotypical as we would expect them to present. And what I always kind of think about is having an eating disorder or disordered eating behaviours is almost like it's not the catalyst, it'll be a coping strategy for dealing with something else that has happened. So at one time, that person that walked through the door will have used eating, whether that's restriction or overeating, as a way to cope, as a way to be in control. For something bigger that is happening around. And so we can look at trends and we can look at what's coming up for people, but it really is unique in terms of, like, we know that, there's 1.25 million people in the UK are affected by eating disorders. And there is a lot of similarities in how they present, but everyone, I think, has their own unique journey as well. And I think that's just really important mentioning as well. So I think our kind of therapists and our counsellors, they're so wonderful, and we have such great experience across the team in, like, the different areas that they work within to kind of support people and kind of really get to the root cause of why food is being used as a coping mechanism.
So I imagine a lot of people don't actually know why it's got to that level. They don't understand. There was a trigger point somewhere along the line. It could have been, a very, nonchalant comment in high school. It could have been something as bad as being shamed publicly. There's different varying levels, and we all respond to those things differently, don't we?
Absolutely.
Sometimes it takes us a comment to push someone over the edge, a very small one. Sometimes it takes a big event in front of a big crowd. Just touching, I guess, on some of the things around wearables and tech and glucose monitors. These things are everywhere, right? And do you find that the clients you work with eating disorders tend to get very into the numbers and are very, it's control based, right? So are they looking for every ounce of control they can have over their intake of food?
Yeah, I would say there's a definite theme there, and especially apps like MyFitnessPal and where we're kind of putting your food in and controlling the calories and things like that are still very kind of dominant in people's lives as well. And this is, I've been in my recovery journey coming up to 10 years, but I remember prior to that, I was using MyFitnessPal and I was kind of logging absolutely everything. And it's like knowing how it goes from logging everything because you want to be healthy and you want to be in, like, the best shape for training, and when it crosses that line. And I think with the amount of wearables out there now and all the different kind of glucose monitors and heart monitors, it's just a minefield for people. It's like there's a lot of added pressure, I think, on people that just want to maybe start off wanting to just get a little bit healthier. And then you can see almost like the decline of, I just want to kind of track my food too. And that's the thing with eating disorders. Like, it doesn't just happen overnight, does it? You don't just wake up and go, oh, I'm going to have an eating disorder. It's not something that is planned. I think it's something that is very, very gradual. And using my own experience, for example, I remember I was living abroad at the time and feeling like I was really unfit and really wanted to kind of get into running. And I tried going for a run and I was like, I can't even run to the end of the street, and feeling really unfit and really crap about myself. And so, like, going and joining a running club, and then being around other people that were really fixated on it. And then that kind of made me want to get better. And then the nutrition came. And then it wasn't something that happened overnight. It was really little bit by little bit. And we kind of look at it as kind of patterns of behavior, don't we? And rituals. So every kind of day or week, you might have like a different ritual that comes, and then it stacks up. So you're kind of in it. You're so deep in it. And it's really hard to get out of.
There's a pressure then to maintain all those habits. And if one thing starts slipping, you suddenly get this panic, and then you overcompensate by just cutting out all calories. And yeah, I can see why it's spiraled. It's tricky for me because I use MyFitnessPal with a lot of my clients to get them in shape. And I've used MyFitnessPal for well over 10 years, but I'm again it. I could eat until the cows come home. I find it really useful for something at the end of the day, say, that's your calories. If you had anything over that, you just eat into excess now. And don't get me wrong, I will occasionally. There's no restrictions. I don't think I've got any kind of disordered eating. I will allow myself those things if I really want them. But I do like something telling me that that's all you need. If you want to perform the way you want to perform, feel the way you want to feel, look the way you want to look, that's kind of like, that's the cap there, basically. And not everyone gets that kind of say, response from that. Some people will take it too far. We've had people come on the program and straight away you can see them just get into it, and we've been like, right, let's take that away. I've coached people, coaching one person now with anorexia or recovering anorexia, and again, first thing we said was, we're not going to do anything with your food. The one thing I'm not going to touch at all is food. You go and control that as much as you want. I might give you some suggestions and say, can you fit a little bit more protein there if you want to? It might help with some muscle that you're trying to build, but I have no control of what she eats. And I think not every coach gets that though. And that's sometimes where we fall short as coaches in our industry, of not understanding people's histories and noticing those little early warning signs. I've had 2 people come to me from other coaches with eating disorders. No shame on the other coaches. I'm not going to call anyone out here, but they got the eating disorder because they were given a set meal plan, and they had to have the same breakfast, lunch, evening meal, snacks every day, and that's what got them in shape. And they found it really difficult to get off that plan and to come away from those meals. And they felt like if they didn't eat those exact meals, they wouldn't get in that shape they got in before. They got in incredible shape. They showed me the photos. It was fantastic. But the issue was, when they came away from that, they couldn't get back into normal eating. So having, again, food is so nuanced, right? Everyone needs a specific thing to keep them satiated, to keep them sane, to keep them healthy, but not to be too obsessed.
I think like with the let's just call them health monitors, like they're a kind of catalyst for control. And if you're the kind of person who doesn't have a problematic relationship with control, then by all means, and if it works for you, but if you know that you do have a problematic relationship with control, on the spectrum of things that you could use, because ultimately, I think we all need control in our lives. Where does it fall on that spectrum of control? Is it going to lead to something that is going to be quite hard to recover from? Or is it something that you incorporate in your daily life and you have a relatively healthy relationship with it? And I think that I guess what we see is that there is a trend of people within the eating disorder community, perhaps, or those who are vulnerable to that, where they are on the end of the spectrum where it becomes problematic. So yeah, I think our big message is not to shame, so we're not going to shame anyone for eating this. It's just where it falls on.
It's awareness raising, I think. It's kind of helping people realize what their own kind of self-awareness is as well. I know for me, I ditched the wearables because I knew that when I was wearing them, I couldn't stop at 10. Like it had to be a rounded number. I couldn't run and it'd be like 9.78. I'd have to be running around my block to get it to 10 because I needed that control and I needed to have burned X amount of calories. And it was so ingrained and it was becoming problematic. And for me now, I won't wear them because there's just maybe that risk that it might get back to that point.
It's great for our audience to hear that, because if they're listening to this going, yeah, I do that. I do run around the block a few times to try and get that extra 200 meters. So hit that 5K or 10K. these are like little early warning signs. Like definitely be looking out for those.
And that's definitely not me saying that if you need to round it up to 5K or 10K, then you have an issue with exercise and eating at all. But I think it's just being really self-aware and, you know, eating a certain way. You can be healthy, you can eat what you want to eat, but I think it's being aware, you know, are your friends inviting you out for, you know, pizza on a Friday night? Does that invoke fear? Because actually I've been on plan all week, so I can't go out and have pizza on a Friday because that's going to undo all my hard work. That's like a kind of a bit of a red flag or an early warning sign that, you know, maybe you know, the disordered pattern of behavior is becoming taking over different areas of your life or aspects of your life. And I think these are the really, really early warning signs that we just want people to recognize, don't we? And be like, oh, you know, I do that, or I kind of have these behaviors. What for me and for Sophie, and as an organization, really, we're early intervention and we're prevention. We don't want people to be having to get to the point of being really, really ill and in the deep trenches of having an eating disorder and getting admitted to hospital, which we see before they actually say, I've got an eating disorder. We want it to kind of normalize that some of these early warning signs, if picked up early, people have got a far better chance at recovery. Yeah, I you know, I know you were saying, weren't you, Sophie, like you had that kind of early intervention and when you were at school and it all happened really fast for you, which was at the time really difficult, but you've reflected on that actually that early intervention was really...
Yeah. And I mean, like, it was, I see it as early intervention, even though I went into a hospital, but more so because I hadn't suffered from an eating disorder for that long. So early intervention is it within 3 years, isn't it? So and I think that, yeah, it did enable me to recover relatively quickly, to be honest.
Yeah. So far, we've discussed eating disorders as quite a broad umbrella. For the sake for the audience, do you mind running into a few, I suppose, of the diagnosis that could be given from any early intervention, from, again, any sort of route medically that people go through?
Yeah, so like the different types of eating disorders. Yeah. So I guess the one that kind of everyone knows is anorexia. So I'll start with that. And anorexia, the presentation of anorexia often is someone who is either lost a lot of weight very quickly, or someone who is underweight, and the method of their relationship with food is a restrictive eating disorder. So they're restricting the amount that they eat. The kind of physical warning signs of that might be someone who's cold all the time, their fingertips are blue, they have like a downy layer of hair on their face or on their arms maybe, and this is the same with all eating disorders pretty much, like a kind of social withdrawal. I guess that's a behavior kind of warning sign. Not everyone always talks about kind of going on a diet or what they're eating, so they might kind of you might not know that they're kind of restricting they might not talk about food an awful lot, but you might see them disappearing at meal times or making excuses not to come out for dinner or something like that. And then we have bulimia. I think, again, often a kind of what people think with bulimia, they think, oh, people who make themselves sick. And yes, that's true. However, the sickness, as in vomiting, is a purging behavior, and purging can show up, yes, in vomiting, but it can also be over exercising, and it can also be using laxatives in excessive amount. And bulimia is kind of can be part of a binge restrict cycle. So that purging can fit into that kind of cycle. So someone who might binge eat and then feel a lot of guilt and shame and then purge in any of those kind of 3 ways that I listed. I guess that brings me on to binge eating. So binge eating, essentially, yes, it exists in a binge restrict cycle. So often what you'll see is maybe someone who doesn't eat all day, and they're trying to be, quote unquote, good. And then because the body does not like to be in starvation mode, it will go into kind of binge mode, perhaps in the evening. And this isn't overeating. This is often, or it's not just overeating, it's eating an excessive amount and often in secret. And that in secret is an important thing as well. And there is a hell of a lot of shame around binge eating, and it's actually the most common eating disorder. And then we have ARFID. ARFID is a relatively new kind of newly recognized eating disorder. You used to maybe kind of understand it as picky eating in children. It shows up a lot in the neurodivergent community. So this is more than picky eating. This is essentially, often it starts in childhood, maybe a rat kind of gets diagnosed around the age of 10, 11. And this is, say, a real sensory kind of fear around food. And it can also be, say, someone sees someone choking on a piece of food and then they develop, or they choke themselves on that piece of food and then develop a fear around choking on food or whatever. So it's not based on weight or kind of aesthetic. It's more like internal and like that kind of fear-based, sensory-based. And it might look like someone, they can only eat beige foods or foods of a certain texture. They maybe at one point started with they say, for instance, hated bananas, let's say, the texture, the smell, the taste of them, everything about them. And then they realized that bananas had a similar texture to another food. And then it kind of extrapolates out. So ARFID, the difference between ARFID and picky eating, it kind of swallows up whole food groups. And then things start, vitamin,
Nutritional deficiency.
And then finally, in terms of kind of diagnosable eating disorders, I'll let you talk about the non-diagnosable ones. We've got something called OSFED, which is otherwise specified food eating disorder, and it's essentially like a cluster term for someone who maybe presents with like multiple presentations, or they don't fit maybe specifically into the kind of DSM criteria of eating disorders. And then, do you want to talk about the kind of the other ones that aren't quite yet on the DSM?
Yeah, so I guess the ones that aren't diagnosable ones, we're looking at kind of orthorexia, which is really closely linked to kind of the fitness community. So orthorexia is an unhealthy obsession with eating healthy, if that makes sense. Okay. So only eating foods that you would deem clean, healthy, good for you. And this is something that is quite progressive as well. And it becomes to a point where you might fear food. So you might start feeling that you can only eat certain foods that you deem appropriate for you. So you start to cut out whole food groups. So you might start cutting out carbohydrates. You might start cutting out fats because they're deemed as unhealthy. It's a real fear that the food that you're putting in your body is dirty or unclean, and it's not being helped with kind of social media and hashtags such as Eat Clean and things like that, which was a huge movement. Orthorexia is not recognised as a on the DSM currently, but it has been around since like the late 1990s, I would say.
So what I didn't realise was all these eating disorders can be combined actually in one person. It's not like one person suffers from each thing. They can have a range of things. And I only know this because I had a client yesterday who came to me. I told him you guys were coming on, and he actually messaged me and said, can I message you privately about this? Because I put something in our WhatsApp group. I said, absolutely. He said his missus, she has a phenomenally stressful job. And one of her ways of coping with it is every now and again, just binge eating. Yeah. But she is trying to be on this health kick. She's trying to stay in shape. So she'll binge eat. She'll kind of purge a little bit. And then she'll not eat for like a few days. And so she's got all three in kind of one incident there, where it starts with the stress, that leads to the binge eating, that leads to the purging, that leads to, I'm just not going to eat for a few days to kind of reset and balance everything. And it almost seemed like, number one, it was a coping mechanism for stress. Like all this started as a coping mechanism. Food was her thing that she went to, but she felt bad. So it's this kind of vicious circle she was going around on. And I guess also like how much, it's just, I know this lady as well, and how much I never would have ever imagined this was part of her kind of coping strategy if she hadn't mentioned it. So it does make you think how many other people are suffering with this in silence, and whether it's relationships and partners that are all dealing with it by themselves, and knowing that you guys are here, something as simple as a conversation with you guys could just reset that whole chain of behaviour patterns.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's not always black and white, is it?
Rarely.
It's very, very rarely black and white. And I think, you know, I would say I'm a perfect example of that. For many years, not believing that I had an eating disorder because I didn't present in a certain way. I didn't hit the criteria for having an eating disorder. And when I did eventually think, oh, you know, very many years in, this is taking over aspects of my life, and kind of reaching out and going to a GP. The first response was, okay, jump on the scales, let's weigh you. And it was like, your BMI is fine. And that was like, for that eating disorder, we talk about it as having like the eating disorder voice in your head. And that noise that kind of takes over and like that kind of chatters to you kind of convinced me, well, if GP's saying I'm okay, I must be absolutely fine. And then convincing myself that I didn't have an eating disorder, and then going around the motions of, you know, restriction and then overeating. And it's really difficult for people, I think, to come forward, because we are surrounded by diet talk as well, all day, every day, in offices, you know, out and about in the community. You know, you could just be stood in Starbucks or something, and people in front of you are talking about, should I be good? Should I have the cake? Oh, that's naughty. People label food in such a way that it's really difficult to talk about it. So everywhere we are, there's this food talk. So if you're struggling with something, it's really hard to then say, this is a problem. So it's done in kind of hidden behind closed doors a lot of the time, especially when it comes to things like binge eating disorder, because people just kind of perceive it as overeating and being greedy, when actually that's not the case at all.
Is there a worse time of year for this? I'm thinking about Christmas coming up, and like with people potentially being like, right, I'm just going to get everything out of my system now. Do you get a lot of like one type of diagnosis coming through the door at certain times of the year, whether it's summer, people getting in shape, those kind of anorexic, you know, clients coming through the door? Is there times that are worse in the year? Is there certain people that come through the doors at certain times? Have you noticed that?
Yeah,
The themes.
I think definitely. Like, so I sat in and helped facilitate we run peer support groups the first Tuesday of every month, and they're open to anyone. And I sat in on one around this time last year, and it was pretty full because I think people were struggling. You know, not only have you got, you know, you've got a lot of work obligations in terms of work socials coming up, very anxiety provoking for anyone with a disordered eating or an eating disorder. But then you've also got the knowledge of what's coming after Christmas, which is the emphasis on restriction. And that doesn't just affect someone who's got a restrictive eating disorder, because someone who suffers from something like binge eating, that is like, the idea of not having enough food is terrifying. So I think that around this time of year for sure, and then with something like ARFID, circling back to that one, which is the often picked up in children. It's a lifelong thing, but it's often picked up in children. The transition between like a primary and secondary school is, you know, a really big thing, because it involves a lot of change, which is often really hard for someone who has ARFID. So then you might see, you know, the first term, so like coming back to school in September. Yeah, do you have any?
I think Christmas is a really hard period for people with disordered eating. It's just being out of that comfort zone, going, like you said, going out maybe for more meals or being expected to, visiting family, being out of the safety of your own home where you're comfortable, eating your meals as well. If you're traveling around, seeing family, our OT here is fantastic, and she runs groups actually. And I remember last Christmas, we ran a group managing the festive period, and that was really well attended. And it was, it was I think it is important to understand that for people that are supporting those with disordered eating behaviours or eating disorders, the language, and you're coming up to Christmas and the language that people use around it. And I see this a lot as well in the fitness industry. Christmas is coming, I can eat whatever I want. I'm having a cheat meal. Things like this are really quite triggering and really uncomfortable for people that have eating disorders. And then, you come to Christmas and it is very much about eating, isn't it? You're getting a lot of people that are saying, oh, I'm off work for 2 weeks. I'm just going to kick back. I'm just going to sit on the sofa. I'm just going to eat. And that can be really difficult for people. And a big part of what we do in our training as well, it's about how when we work with others to cascade the knowledge on to how to kind of communicate concern. And I think that's really important. And through the work that we do with friends and family as well, is how can you support someone that has an eating disorder. And these are like really big times, like Christmas, holiday, and any kind of holidays, changes, the new kind of semester term, university term, things like that. What language are we using? How are we supporting people at that time? So it's like looking at those interventions.
I think speaking of I suppose the language that's used and things that can maybe be, like you said, quite triggering. I said to you girls before we started recording, if me or Ryan say anything that maybe is problematic, because obviously I mentioned we can sometimes be in a bit of a bubble and it's never ill-intended to sort of trigger anyone. Is there anything in particular that you mentioned? Clean eating already, you mentioned, restrict, diet, all these sort of terms. Is there anything that maybe people can be aware of minding the language, should we say?
I suppose it depends like what kind of sector you're looking in. If we take like the fitness industry, for example, I've been in my own gym and I've been on the gym floor and I've had 2 fitness instructors just stood like poking fun at each other's weight and talking about how good they'd been over the weekend or how how bad they've been or they've had cheat meals and things like that. And I think it's really important. You don't know who's around. You don't know what struggles people are going with. And we were talking, weren't we, recently about a spin class where the instructor was just shouting, come on, burn your calories, earn your food tonight. And I think it's language like that that can be really, really triggering for people, and not just with an eating disorder, but people that are already kind of worried that they might have disordered eating behaviors around food. And then you've got someone kind of saying to you, you've earned your calories. I think it's a big it's a bigger picture though, isn't it? It's happening a lot, I think, in the fitness industry. And for some people that can be really motivating. I don't want to take away from that. For some people that might have a healthy, balanced relationship with food, they might want that kind of motivation. But I think as someone in that role, it's your responsibility to really get to know your client and understand the best kind of approaches around that as well.
I guess that's why it's trickier in something like a spin class where you've got a lot of people who respond to different cues. And it's really got me thinking about everything that I say now and going back to our things. And we actually did a podcast last week around our ways of like staying on track in December. And it's got me really thinking about some of the language that we used. And we were kind of like, one of the things I said it was like, Christmas Day is like a day off, have whatever you want, go and enjoy yourself, fill up on foods. Maybe that wasn't really the best way of kind of describing it or putting it, or maybe I should have said just eat normally, or, should we be eating normally every day though? I don't know. It's so hard to tell.
It is great.
I feel like it's eggshells a little bit. So sitting in the floor.
100%. And again, it's not to shame people, and we don't want people to be kind of watching this, listening to this, and being like, "Oh my gosh, like I say that, or I do that." It's not about that. I think it's just being mindful with anything, isn't it? And just being aware.
So, Sophie, you mentioned earlier about maybe children transitioning term times, starting at secondary school, high school. From a parenting aspect, would you say, is there anything that parents can be aware of, any behaviours, any maybe language that the children are using that maybe we can circle back to, and maybe if they have got those suspicions, how can they maybe best support these young people?
I guess I can give myself as an example here. So one thing that my parents noticed first, because it can be quite easy to hide A, what you're eating, and B, if your body's shape has changed, because you can, you know, change what you're wearing and, you know, disguise things. But I think that the biggest thing that my parents would have noticed is my change in personality. So I was hyper focused like on things, and was kind of, I'd always been a child who could kind of like get obsessed with things, but this was like a real kind of laser gaze on stuff. Like, for instance, I shifted my focus from things that might have been in interests outside of school to, I just was, you know, would sit kind of and go work way too hard, kind of perfectionist kind of behaviors coming in, and to the point where like I had teachers and my parents telling me like, you need to stop working so hard, but they thought that it was just because I'd started a new term and that I wanted to do well, but actually I was trying to, like, you know, kind of
Control the aspects.
control aspects, like kind of, if I can't, you know, if I'm struggling kind of in my mind, like how can I silence that as well? I can kind of try and laser focus on this thing. And also I think that, you know, focusing really hard on my studies helped me like kind of skip meal times as well, because, oh, what's Sophie doing when she's working? So I think that, yeah, that real kind of personality shift, because I was prior to that not very interested in my, I wasn't like that interested in doing well, and then all of a sudden I was just obsessed. So that, and then I think that and I'm talking from the experience of someone who had anorexia. So I just was very cold all the time, like really, like noticeably. I remember being on the side of a netball pitch, and I just went to sleep because I was so cold. Like I just fell asleep on the side of the pitch, and that, you know, like obviously it's like, oh, that's a bit concerning. Got a child who's asleep on the side of the pitch.
Sophie's not going on this game anyway.
So yeah, and then I think in terms of other presentations of eating disorders, things to look out for are heightened levels of anxiety, or heightened levels of, you know, depression, or, you know, signs of low mood, irritability, snapping. And this is really hard with teenagers, because teenagers, like, their mood is up and down, right? So I think that maybe when it's around food, like snapping back at things. So an example might be, are you sure you're not hungry? No, like kind of that, like really, you know, like stopped up and, you know, storm off or something like that. I'm like,
not wanting to entertain the idea of food.
Don't want to entertain the idea. Yeah.
I think the food itself is really hard to pick up on, because I think when you have an eating disorder, you just get this like new level of deception, don't you? I have like really vivid memories of like my mom making me pack lunch and then just getting to the end of the road and just throwing it in the bin, because just not want, because the eating disorder was telling me to do that. And like,
what age was that?
Probably about 14, 15 when it first started presenting. And
so there was early warning signs for you even before you got into the fitness, and you were that fitness person.
Yeah,
there was
control, perfectionism, very, very similar to kind of Sophie's experience of like entwined in that. But the food was almost like last. And if you think like busy working families, we're not always sitting down as a family to eat anymore. So it might be kids eating earlier or later. It's quite easy to kind of get away. You're not seeing your children all day. They're at school, secondary school, cafeterias are so big. So teachers haven't got eyes on every child. So it's really easy to avoid. It's kind of avoid eating in school, isn't it, really? And then you get home and, you know, you might be moving the food around your plate so it looks like you're eating. So it's actually, food is like the last thing that you might pick up on. And you might not always pick up on like a dramatic weight loss either, because as Sophie said, you might wear baggier clothes and things like that, but certainly like changes in mood and kind of personality shifts and things like that are going to be your earlier warning signs. And we speak to teachers throughout training in the education field, and they say, you know, what are some of the early things that we would be picking up on, and how can we kind of communicate that concern? And it's a really tricky one. And I remember having we were having a conversation with some school nurses, weren't we? And we were like, well, if the students sat and refusing to take their coat off because they're freezing, and they walk out like because they're like, I'm not taking my coat off. So it might be that they don't want to show their body, they're freezing. So little kind of signs like this, and we want that to be almost like that second nature, that it's clicking, that actually if that child doesn't want to take the coat off, or they're going to the library every lunchtime instead of going to get food, that is a bit of a red flag, you know?
Yeah. It's a really good question, because coming back to the couple that I was talking about who, you know, his missus showed signs of all three and that coping mechanism for stress. One of his questions straight after he told me that story was like, what better way can I support my partner when she's going through that stuff? Is there anything I can do?
Yeah, I think the kind of like thing to maybe not do is ignore it. And I think that it's better to say something, I don't know if you agree, than to not. And I think that recognizing that it's also not about food, it's about like that person, how they're feeling inside. And for instance, like with me, like I was feeling like just incredibly anxious. I think that was like the real thing. Like it started with me feeling, you know, I was getting teased at school, like I'd gone through this back operation, all of that. And not at one point did anyone that said to me, are you okay? So I think that, you know, like kind of not burying your head in the sand, ideally. I know it's hard. And then kind of adopting what, there's this thing called the Maudsley method, which is used within eating disorders. And it's often as part of the Treading on Eggshells workshop that our carers lead, Katie, does here. And there's essentially, you know, you've got your ostrich, which is the head of the sand. Then you've got your rhino, which is forcing logic and going, well, you know, can't you sit, like, this is the science behind this. And then you've got your terrier that's nagging, like, oh, come on, eat. And then your dolphin, ideally, which is gently nudging, swimming alongside, and patient, and kind of constantly reminding yourself, like, it's not about me, it's not about food, it's about this person and what they're going through inside. So yeah, that's a whole model in itself, but I guess it's just a quick
affects the whole family. It's not just affecting that one person, it's affecting everyone that's in your support network, really. It's really, really difficult.
True. I mean, spinning the tables, I suppose, on that, flipping the coin, if maybe a parent is suffering and they maybe don't want to, I don't know, mirror their own behaviours onto the children, and them sort of seeking out for advice, that's 100% something that must be an issue. One thing I've written down here is support over surveillance. And I think being more of a dolphin, like what Sophie said, I didn't think I'd say that today, but I'm about to be more dolphin is such a, I think it's a great way to look at it as well, because you've given people some models there. But if you have got someone who is maybe a terrier and you suspect that it isn't helping, if maybe someone's listening right now, how can they speak to people and say, listen, you're not helping? Like, does everything have to be self-referred through SYEDA, or is there can other people raise concern on behalf of someone else?
100%. Friends and family can refer in to our service. We run workshops, which I think are 6 weeks. It's called Treading on Eggshells, which I absolutely love that name. I think it's genius. And that is for carers, support network of anyone that has an eating disorder or disordered eating behaviours, to be able to provide a supportive environment. So it's a group that runs over 6 weeks, and each session is different, and it's basically equipping parents, carers, the skills really to be able to support someone with an eating disorder, and they can refer it.
Amazing. That's more than what I'm pleasantly surprised with a lot of this, which sort of brings me on to my next question, which was probably about, I suppose, the support that organisations like SYEDA can give. I know you said that, you know, the network in Sheffield is fairly extensive now, but in terms of spreading the message, raising awareness, what sort of services are on offer, not just for the people affected, but the people who again, like you said, carers, parents, that sort of stuff?
Well, we want to reach everyone, really, don't we? All get the biggest reach. I guess in terms of kind of prevention and training, we want to equip healthcare professionals, education professionals with skills and information on how to support or be aware of eating disorder presentations, so that they can support. And then anyone that's directly affected, whether that's the individual, they can refer in, or a family member or a loved one, they can use our services as well. So it's kind of like a two-pronged approach, really, isn't it? It's kind of doing the prevention and the early intervention work, but then it's also from that generating referrals into our service so that people can get the best support that they need, whether that's being part of a peer support group or one-on-one counselling or CBT therapy. So I think we have a lot of different avenues to be able to provide people with support throughout South Yorkshire.
Just to confirm as well that you don't get, your funding doesn't come from having more people in your service. Am I right in thinking that?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, because again, I remember asking that you guys when we first spoke about how is this funded? Is it the more people you get through the door, the more successful the organisation is? And that purely just from a reassurance standpoint for myself as well. So it's great that there's organisations like SYEDA out there who are very altruistic and doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
There's something, I guess it's, I don't know if it's even probably not a diagnosed thing, but in our kind of fitness world, it's something that's talked about quite a lot, which is, it's known in the gyms like bigorexia, where people feel like they're not big enough, and they reckon that most competitive bodybuilders are like that. Whether that's more along eating disorders or body image, probably more body image than anything else, but they're trying to eat so much to get big and they're overtraining and they're just pushing themselves to levels that are quite unhealthy in this mission of being massive, essentially.
Yeah.
Have you come across that in here?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's definitely, I think that, you know, it's really important to point out here because bigorexia, as it's colloquially termed, it can be, you know, men or women, but it often shows up in men. And I think that we often do think of eating disorders as being gendered, as being, you know, just for women. And it is, well, the current statistic as shared by Beat, and this is from research done in 2007. So I think this might look actually more in favour of kind of men and the kind of gender split being more equal now. But it's 1 in 4 people who suffer from eating disorders are men. So that's 25% of people with a diagnosed eating disorder are men. And
it'd be a lot lower than that, actually.
Yeah. So it's and again, I stress diagnosed eating disorder because that's not accounting for disordered eating or people who haven't gone for a diagnosis. And we know there's a lot of shame in the community of men who might be having eating disorders and not wanting to go get help because they think it's not that for them. So back to bigorexia, there's a fantastic guy called George who works for an organisation called Minds. He set it up, and he absolutely is just kind of leading the way with talk about eating disorders in men and young boys, and particularly around bigorexia or muscle dysmorphia. And it is, I think why it's called bigorexia is because it's so opposite to what we know about anorexia, which is to being smaller and to it's like the reverse body dysmorphia that we're kind of familiar with. And I think that there's also we visited a gym not so long ago, probably at the beginning of this year, and the usage of weights now over cardio is completely shifted. Like there's nothing wrong with that, like, you know, but I think it's perhaps reflective of a trend. And I think, I don't know if you had any thoughts.
Just that we're seeing the age shift as well. So seeing a lot, I don't know if you see this in your gyms as well, but younger boys that are going to the gym now, like it's almost, you know, it's not hanging around in parks anymore, is it? You know, it's kind of going to the gym, it's getting bigger. And we know that, especially with young people, your body's not yet developed, and then you're going into gyms and you're using them, or home gyms. I think perhaps like lockdown, that became huge for people, you know, home gyms, garage gyms and things like that. So I've seen a real shift in that age as well.
I suppose it's celebrated as well in a way where even lads getting into the gym now compared to hanging out on the streets. But sorry to cut you off, Ryan.
No, I was just going to comment that, like, it's funny because the kids that I see now who are like the younger ones, 16 to get a membership now, isn't it? That was me, but before all this was popular. So like before social media, before it was cool to be big and good looking and have a six-pack online, I had a home gym at home, and I was obsessed with like getting a six-pack. I really wanted a six-pack, so I used to like do loads of sit-ups in my room. I used to do like 2 hours of cardio every day. There were certain tendencies as a kid where they were a little bit kind of, you know, disordered. But I think actually getting in the gym environment and seeing other people kind of helped me normalize it. So from my age of 12 to 16, for those 4 years, it was just me in like a home gym, not really knowing what I'm doing, trying a lot of things, you know, enjoying seeing my body evolve, but probably getting in my own head a little bit about what was normal and what wasn't. Going into the gym, then I saw people talking about certain things, doing certain things, learning new things. I actually felt like it was quite helpful for me. But maybe that's because I've been doing it from a young age, like a really young age at 12 to 16. It's got me thinking about some other things like this sort of stuff I was doing as a kid. But I think it's funny to kind of, you know, think if something like this was available back then, would I have done that? Maybe, yeah.
I suppose it gets you thinking. Sophie mentioned there about speaking to more gyms and speaking to more gym owners. Is this something that's a bit few and far between right now? Or is this, I suppose, a mission moving forwards where a service like SYEDA could be a fantastic support mechanism for people who are struggling?
So we have developed a training, which is recognising eating disorders and eating disorder behaviours in the fitness sector. So again, the cascade approach, so looking at getting PTs, gym managers trained up. We've done some really good work with a PT training organisation local in Sheffield, so they can kind of spot the early warning signs as well. And we want to cascade that. I mean, my dream would be to work with every gym and kind of cascade that model through and get everyone trained on the gym floor so that they can kind of spot the early warning signs or recognise or just have a good working knowledge of what disordered eating looks like or excessive exercise looks like. And I think the hardest thing is from a lot of like the PTs that we've spoken to, and we've done so many focus groups and things over the past few months, is that they say, firstly, I want to help, but I just don't know what to say. Or secondly, I have my own problems with disordered eating, and that makes it really difficult. So we are really trying to break down the barriers of people. And again, I know I keep saying normalize, but have discussions like this so people can think, oh, was that a bit disordered? Or, you know, like you just said, you're going back and saying, was that like that behavior? Was that like a normal behavior? So just to kind of get conversations kind of flowing, because it might be that it's just a conversation and someone goes, actually, it wasn't my behavior at the moment isn't problematic, but I'm aware of it. But for someone else, it might touch upon something that's a bit deeper, and that you might have that knowledge to be able to speak to them and support them and help them. So
I think you'd be surprised how many PTs actually in our industry have underlying levels of disorders and stuff like that. And I guess you could say to a certain degree, it's kind of the blind leading the blind eye, you know what I mean? Because clients come to coaches for advice and help and how do I improve my eating? But sometimes they've got their own issues. And why do you think there's not more of a push from big gyms like Pure Gyms and JDs and the Everlast gyms? Why are they not coming through and saying, got to teach our staff to look out for this stuff because it's a big thing, it's been talked about a lot? Is it the fact that it's just not seen as being as nationally an issue right now, or what's the issue there?
I think like working in the prevention space, often people don't want to deal with the problem unless it's a problem that they see. So kind of us going, well, you want to prevent, surely they're like, no, we want to address stuff that's happening like now. So
if they're not constantly bombarded with it on a daily basis, they probably know it happens, but they don't realise that how many individuals are suffering with it, even on an underlying level.
Yeah, because it's so secretive. I mean, 1 in 50 people in the UK with a diagnosed eating disorder. How many people quickly walking down Sheffield High Street is fired? And a good couple of handful, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's diagnosed. So then there's the people who have disordered eating who don't feel like they can go for a kind of assessment or diagnosis because they might not fit criteria, or they might have a lot of shame around it. So yeah, I think it's, and I'm always surprised as to, you know, we do kind of exist in a bit of a bubble, and I am surprised that kind of people don't know as much as we do. Sometimes, so yeah.
What's the main difference, would you girls say, between, you mentioned eating disorders and disordered eating, just to sort of address that? Is disordered eating purely just because it misses the criteria to actually be diagnosed?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that it can exist in different ways. So it can be that someone doesn't meet the criteria, or it can be almost like a bit of a kind of precursor. So someone might start with disordered eating behaviors. So they might start to kind of restrict their food here and there, or, you know, kind of yeah, they're maybe in the early stages of an eating disorder that then later gets diagnosed. So you can have people who live with disordered eating for really extended periods of time. And I would argue that that is just as harmful, if not, you know, more than, you know, being diagnosed with an eating disorder and then being able to go into recovery and get, do you know what I mean? So yeah, that's...
As far as that cascade approach that you both mentioned earlier, that's how I come across you girls, in terms of you working with another organisation who said, you must speak to these two girls, they're incredible. What could people like me and Ryan do to, I suppose, to not just raise awareness, but maybe introduce you to other gyms and gym owners if someone's listening and they believe, hang on, what, I didn't know this wasn't normal practice. What do you mean PTs aren't aware of their own eating disorders? Or what if they have their own eating disorders? Like, what can myself and Ryan do?
I think definitely direct people towards our website.
Yeah.
Because that really is where we have all of our services on there, and we've got our referral forms on there and everything. And there is a training page on there that lists the recognising eating disorders in sports and fitness, and you'll find our contact details on there. So I would say that's probably the best way to get in contact with us. And we do have an Instagram, which even though I mentioned earlier that we kind of use it as a springboard, but if you do happen to come across us on Instagram, it's at SYEDA Charity. That's SYEDA Charity on Instagram. Yeah.
Amazing. And if we were to introduce you to gyms, what sort of services are on offer there? Is it something your team can come in and speak about, provide training, or maybe some online resources? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, we've got a mixture, haven't we? So we can deliver the training, or we've got a really good resource pack. We've also, well, Sophie's worked really hard on putting together a series of posters that can be put up in gyms, like on the back of toilet doors and things like that.
It's a great idea.
With a QR code so people can scan that. 'Cause obviously, it's going to be really hard if you're putting that up on a gym floor because of like the secrecy and the shame that's attached to it. So we've got some wallet-sized cards as well that people can pick up and just take to have a look at a home later. But I guess it's just, for me, I see it as just for people just having a working knowledge. We're not expecting anyone, especially that's working in the fitness sector, to become an expert. To become an expert by experience and be able to all of a sudden overnight be able to support someone that has an eating disorder or eating disorder behaviours, but just having a working knowledge of what to do. And even the very basics of just knowing about SYEDA, knowing that we're here, that you can refer it in. So kind of spreading that message as well, that there is a service here that you can come to that will listen and, you know, without judgment.
I think having posters in gyms is a great idea, because if you're someone who suffers with an eating disorder and you're in this place where you think everyone's got it sussed out, no one in here has this thing that I've got, and you see a poster and you go, oh no, shit, they get it, they understand it. You know what I mean? I think, have you ever thought about going around to gyms and maybe handing these posters out? And
Easier said than done, I think.
I was going to say, because if you go into a gym, how do you approach that? Do you say, like, this is an eating disorder? What do I say? Our gym's got eating disorders. Like, you know, I mean, it's a very sensitive topic, isn't it? Maybe you could just pull someone aside and email, say, right, can I sit down with someone in management, or walk in and just say, look, these are the facts and figures around gyms in the UK.
Yeah.
I can imagine somewhere like that station being up for that, because they, you know, they have a really like varied crowd, and you know, just certain gyms are definitely up for it. The ones that are a bit more switched on.
Yeah, and just starting at the top as well, and like we wanted to go in at the top and do that kind of cascade down, didn't we? So who trains the PTs? Let's get in there first. That was our priority, wasn't it, when we first started talking about getting this into gyms. And yeah, go into that training academy and being like, right, they're training let's get it part of that initial course material.
I was going to say part of the PT course should be like a module in there. It's like eating disorders, how to spot those. Doesn't have to be extensive. It can just be a few little things like you mentioned, you know, some little tips and tricks and things to look out for. Absolutely.
And I think, like I say, if there's anything we can do, whether it's introducing you to gym owners, to other training providers, I'm sure we'll happily do that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I do think that, yeah, that relationship building is key, and it definitely is the best way to do it is kind of introductions and like word of mouth and things like that, because an email can, you know, we get so many emails when we're sure that
After gyms,
yeah, everyone gets so many emails and everyone's really busy. And I think that sometimes, like when you send an email, someone can kind of take a quick glance and go, "Oh, that sales thing." We're like, no, what we offer is for free. Like, we're like, you know, we want to help.
But even if you get an email saying free training, you're like, "Ah, it's too good to be true." Yeah. No.
And I think sometimes that's the power of having connections as well, isn't it? It's the power to be able to say, you know, had this really good chat with this organisation, and then pass on the contacts that way as well, networking.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, I definitely think getting down just out of places and spreading the word, and that's a massive message for sure.
Any final questions for the girls from you, Ryan?
No way. I think I covered pretty much everything, but I just want to thank you guys for being so open and honest. And we've been chatting all week about how much we've looked forward to this, because it is such a huge part of what we do on a daily basis, a part of even the listeners that we get on. Everyone will have experienced something. It's a spectrum, right? And everyone's on that spectrum somewhere. Can we talk about this? Can we highlight it? Can we get people early doors, like you said? So yeah, massive thank you.
I was trying to think of like a bit of practical advice or like a hopeful message using my own experience, and really thinking about like it in terms of like the fitness sector and nutrition. And I came up with, you know, you can care about nutrition without being completely obsessed with nutrition, and recovery doesn't mean abandoning your health altogether. It just means redefining it. So I think that's really important, just to kind of get out there that we're not asking people, especially under, you know, this umbrella of the fitness sector, to abandon health at all. I think it's so important. Exercise is so important in recovery. I think it's so important for mental health. And so, yeah, we're certainly, just a bit of a caveat, like we're definitely not telling people that, you know, you should abandon your fitness at all, but we're looking at how we can redefine it and how we can have healthier relationships with food.
Yeah. Great that you understand that as well. Probably coming from the fact that you have trained before, and you like health and fitness, you like training, you like being in shape.
It's really, it's a difficult one, because it's like, do I now need to stop doing all of these things because I'm in recovery? And
it's not like two teams, you have to pick a side. There's a middle ground there.
That takes time to get to that conclusion, that it is just about redefining it and just looking at it from a different lens, really.
Amazing. Awesome. What a message.
End it then.
Girls,
thank you so much for today. Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us on the Fitness Podcast. See you next one.
See you soon.
Thanks.